Hi everyone. This video today is talking about the functionality in Agent.ai, where when you go to add action and you go to the advanced tab, there is this function called call serverless function, this particular action. And so this video is going to talk about why this is important, what it does, and how you can then use it in your agent. And so the only way to do any kind of processing currently in Agent.ai is to actually use the LLM. And so, other than the get data options, if you wanted to go do any kind of analysis, um, generate a file name, you want to go find out, generate a search term that needs to be sent to a search action, all things that we would normally in the past as a programmer have written code to do, you can now tell the LLM to do it, and then the LLM can now return that output to you. Um, and The problem with that is that one, the LLM does not always return what is known as a deterministic result, which is every time you run it, it's not like it's going to give you exactly the same output. And sometimes code is the best way to do it. And so if you can just call a piece of code, it'll always give you the same output because it's deterministic. The other reason is sometimes it's just wasteful to use the LLM to go do certain kind of helper functions and sometimes the LLMs aren't very good at things like analytics and stuff like that, where it's just much better to call a Python code to go do some kind of statistical analysis or take some data and do some analytics. So these are all use cases where you might say, I have this very specific need in my agent where I need to go call something to do something, and I don't want to use the LLM or the LLM is not good to do it. What do you do? And so this is where you can then call this serverless function. Now, there are two ways you could execute code in agent.ai. One is you can invoke a web API. So if your application or your code that you've written is exposed as a API, you can use the invoke web API to do it. But what if you're like me, you're not really a developer, you don't know how to deploy Python code, but you do want to call Python code? So then agent.ai makes it easy to call a serverless function where you can just put the code in and it will actually go and deploy it. So with that context, let me tell you a simple example that I've been trying to do. So I'm trying to get articles from, let's say, Reddit. So let's say I want to know what people in Reddit are talking about DeepSeek. And so I want to search for the topic DeepSeek. Now I could just, do a Google search and get that information, but I want to get it from a very particular site. And so let's say I want to see what people in Reddit are talking about. And then the last thing that I want to do is I want to only know what's being discussed about this in the last, let's say, day. And so I just want information for the last day. And this could be, I could have it for the last 60 days, last 30 days, but since this is a hot topic and Reddit, there's a lot of discussions going on, I want it for the last day. So to do this, so I'm going to run this, then I'm going to talk about what needs to happen for this to work in Agent AI. So what I need to do is go do a Google search, but I need to pass a very specific search term to my search query. And that search term looks like this. So if I want to go and search for after a certain date, then I need to do after YYYY dash MM dash DD. And then if I want to search a particular site, I have to do site colon www dot whatever it is, reddit.com in this case. And so as you can imagine, I have to actually in the Google search do things like DeepSeek, after, site, and all of that. And it has to be in that exact format. If it changes a little, then it won't work. And so that's a good reason why I thought, you know what, I'm going to go use the serverless function to go do this. And so when I go run this, and I'm not going to show you how it's running. I'll show you an output that already has this over here. You'll notice here are my list of articles. But more importantly, if I go to the dev console, what you'll notice is that when I call the serverless function, so I get those three inputs, I pass it to my serverless function. What the serverless function then does is returns this string DeepSeek, site, reddit.com after 2025-0128. The other reason why I had to use a serverless function, this is for somebody who's trying to build their own little after a certain date and you want to make it dynamic based on today's date, there is no way for you to find out what today's date is. You can't ask the LLM because the LLM is only trained on data up to a certain time. And so how do you find out what today's date is to say, I want to see all the information about something for the last 1 week, 30 days, 23 days, 22 days, 6 months, or between a certain date range? from the last 3 months to 6 months. You can't do those things using the LLM. So the serverless function is great. So with that context, let me just quickly show you the code that I then called. Uh, so there you go. This is the output that came back, and you can see this is all the stuff going on around DeepSeek. Now, if we get to the actual agent that was built, so the first step in the agent, I mean, so apart from going through, the settings, find recent articles, you put the name, you put your description, the trigger is manual. But when you get to the actions, uh, so you all know how to get input. So this is, I'm using the input type to capture the text. What is the topic that you want? What is the site that you want? What is the number of days from that you want, from today that you want to go get this information from? And then this is the part where I now call the serverless function with all that information. And here, what I'm doing is basically I use ChatGPT to generate this. So one thing to say is, if anybody is trying to do this, you need to know how to write code, or you need to figure out some way to get code generated that you understand. And so my intent here is not to talk through what the code does, but basically what is important is that you load the body event, and then these variables, the days, the site, and the topic, to get it, you have to use this very, very specific functionality where I'm basically saying the days are an integer. So the body has a context array, which then has this variable called out.days. It has a context, which has out.site, another context, out.topic. That's how you get the information, is you're looking for it in this context object. And so if you were to go back and look at the code here that was executed, and if I go to the dev console, and if we were to go look at the context, which is always good. So the information that is passed, there is a lot of information that is passed. And so the way that the agent AI passes these three variables to the serverless function, and that's the piece we're talking about, is that it's passed as part of this context object. And so this is the most important part. If there is one thing you want to learn, is you have to say body, context, and then whatever your variable is, we'll get that out. And in this case, because days is an integer, it does that. Otherwise, if it's just text, you just say body, context, out underscore site, body, context, out underscore topic, and out underscore days, out underscore site, out underscore topic are the three variables. They have to be within the single quotes. They have to be within these square brackets. It has to be exactly like this. And then just to show you those variables over here, out underscore topic is what gets passed. Out underscore site is what gets passed. So that's how you get. And then once you do it, then the rest of it is basically I get the query, I pass the query to my Google search, I get the results, and then I format it and return it. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of why you need serverless functions, how it can be leveraged, an example of it, and what is the specific syntax to pass variables. The actual code that you write is going to be your code. The key to get it working with Agent AI is to know the syntax to pass the variables, and that's what I wanted to really hone in on. Hope you found this useful.